Oh, sorry.
Live now.
Thank you, Olivia. Okay, this is the Senate Government Operations Committee, and we are back live on Wednesday, February 1st. We are now shifting gears to S39, act relating to compensation and benefits for members of the Vermont Legislature or Vermont Assembly. We have with us Eric Hoefel. Did I say that correctly?
You did.
Okay, awesome. If you would like to sit down with us and join us at the table. And we will introduce ourselves because you have not been here before. And then you can introduce yourself and tell us what you think we should know. I think we asked you to come in because you might know some logistics of how vision works and what things may or may not need to change and how difficult this may or may not be to pass this bill. So I'm Senator Ruth Hardy and I represent the Addison District.
Senator Rebecca White, Windsor.
Bob Norris, Franklin.
Ann Watson, Washington.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor County District.
And this is Senator Vihovsky from this Chittenden Central, and Olivia Parker, our committee assistant, is joining us virtually today. And just to give you some sort of background on why the bill was introduced, we've had a number of legislators recently have struggled really to be able to serve because they haven't been able to afford to serve. And so the lack of benefits and the really low pay has been really a difficult thing, especially in recent years, but I think sort of traditionally. And most legislators have either been wealthier or older and retired. And so it's been really a struggle. And so we're trying to look at ways to better support members of the General Assembly. So that's sort of the background for it. So if you want to introduce yourself and tell us what you think we should know, that'd be great.
Sure. My name is Eric Hoefel. I work in the Finance and Management Office, and I've been working on the vision system for 5 years now. And on that, on the help desk side, I also do a lot of change management work on as we introduce new things and just support the system in general.
Mm-hmm.
That's my background. I read through the bill and based on what I could get out of it, there's really nothing here that concerns us.
Mm-hmm.
We'd have to do things a little bit differently, but nothing's out of the ordinary and nothing would be difficult for us to do. So really wouldn't be any added burden to us from our viewpoint and what we do on the expense side to change things.
So if we were to do legislators could choose the option of having it taxed or untaxed based on how they reported it to you or through Vision. Sure. That wouldn't be an administrative burden at all?
No, we basically set all legislators up the same as of now, as this year. We set you up with templates. You go in and you can do your expense reports on a weekly basis. And which way you chose and how we figured things out. We may have a dual system where those who are going under the way that it's currently done would still have a template, go in and do it the way you do it today. And those who want to get reimbursed for the exact expenses, so they're not taxable, would do it slightly differently, but not in a way that's really any different from what we're used to doing it. Probably the key difference from your viewpoint is if you are getting reimbursed for actual expenses, you have to remember to keep receipts and you have to upload those on the expense reports.
So you would, thank you for saying that, you would prefer that receipts actually be uploaded and be part of the system?
It's the best practice, yes.
Yeah.
From an audit standpoint, if for some reason somebody goes and is auditing an expense report and receipts are attached to the electronic report, it's far easier to find and maintain and make sure they don't get lost over time.
Okay, and that's a preferable best practice. That's a better practice than simply just certifying, saying I attest or attestation.
Our current policies do require receipts for certain transactions, so obviously you don't for mileage, but for hotels and meals you do not have to either. So it would really only be the lodging.
The lodging.
Yeah.
You don't have to for meals? Oh, yeah. I see. Okay. So hold on just a second. Sorry.
Yeah.
And then for the off session, I don't know if you do this through Vision, but the off session time recording for extra committee work. Would that be a problem for people to sort of log hours? Essentially?
Well, hours, we just do the financial side, hours are done through HR.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's our next witness. Okay.
So, but from an expense standpoint, no, we deal with that currently now. If legislators come in for an off-session meeting, we always have been able to deal with expenses, so.
Okay.
Nothing different than what we do today.
So there wouldn't be any kind of added administrative burden or cost to anything that's currently in the bill.
Yeah.
That's great news. Thank you. Senator Clarkson.
Well, we always had the opportunity until this year to choose tax or non-tax.
In the past. it was-
This is a,
Yeah.
Not until this year. No, that's not.
yes, until this year, you could do non-tax or tax.
My understanding was it depended on how, there were.
It was
issues
dependent on the
about how
distance you
distant
drove.
were from the state house. So if you were, if I remember correctly, within 50
50
miles,
50.
it was taxable, and if you were outside of 50 miles, it was not.
But it always gave you an option to do that. I mean, you could choose, some people chose to still,
The system, I think, had the option, but it was supposed to get caught if you went through the expense approval process. But the system always gave you the option.
So since 2018, I believe, we have not had the
2018
option
tax
because of the federal legislation. So the entire time I've been here, it's not been an option.
yeah, well, there we are. So it is never not, we have always, and in the 19 years I've been here, we have always had just a straight per diem,
Mhm.
which is much simpler. I mean, the receipts are a huge amount of time and effort.
I think the difference is the taxable nature of a per diem versus a direct reimbursement for actual expenses. That's really the main difference.
Right. And they're taxed, you mean the per diems now are taxed?
Yes. So, you know, your choice is, do I want to go through the headache of actually going in and probably having to do more detailed work on setting up my expenses every week and uploading receipts, or do I want to just take I'm going to take a per diem and I won't worry about the taxable nature of it?
Right. And the it would be interesting to compare the tax you pay on all the meals you purchase, because we all pay tax on that.
Right.
Versus the tax we pay as income. It'll be interesting difference to look at. I mean, but the ease, if time is money, this is much easier.
Yeah, I mean, from an ease of your time and your effort, per diems are definitely.
And yours.
Well, it really doesn't make any difference to us, honestly. We talked about this over the last couple of days, and from our viewpoint, anything that's in this bill just doesn't really make any difference to us. Now, on Mike's side, when they do approvals, that's a little bit different, so.
I think there's a lot of difference in
For
somebody's
Mike,
time.
But for us, on the vision side, it really doesn't make any difference.
Right, and we have heard from Mike and we'll hear from him again, I'm sure. So we just wanted to make sure, we love to hear from Mike. We wanted to make sure from your perspective that we weren't doing anything that would make your life miserable. So that's good.
We can do other things to make your life miserable.
I'm sure you could.
But we don't.
And I'm sure we can too on our side.
Adam is always very clear when I get it.
Okay, are there other questions at the moment? Go ahead, Senator White.
Thank you, Chair Hardy. So I really appreciate just the clarity of your testimony with this. This is something that's totally doable. The one area that I am a little concerned about is the dependent care benefit and how that is processed. So it sounds like receipts are good to have for that purpose. Do you traditionally have, is there something similar you're already doing?
So I think,
Maybe.
this was a part wasn't quite sure about on our end, and it will depend on how it's done through HR
Oh,
on this side, more so than ours. And we really are truly the expense piece, and again, we can do something like that as an expense, I would guess we could,
Yeah.
but that would be a question for HR,
Okay.
how they're gonna handle it.
Okay, yeah, we can ask the Commissioner. Okay, great. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, Mr. Hopel. I appreciate you coming over here to visit us.
Thank you for having us. I have to admit that I was quite surprised that you were willing to ask us to come and see what it meant to us.
Well-
Usually we get it on the backside where you've gone, well, we passed a law, you guys have to find out.
Oh, well,
It's good to have you.
we wanted to make sure that we weren't causing a headache for anybody who has to deal with anything we might do with this bill. So thank you for joining us. It's really a pleasure. And if something comes up as the bill moves through it, and you change your mind about how much work it may or may not be, just let us know.
Okay, but I'm confident that we can find it.
Okay, great.
And give Adam a big hello.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna hear from the commissioner next. Thank you so much for joining us. And you know us, so we'll just, you can just introduce yourself for the record and let us know what you think we should hear.
Good afternoon. I'm Beth Fastiggi. I'm the Commissioner of Human Resources. And what I thought I would talk about mostly was kind of just an overview of the new benefits that you're proposing in this bill and kind of what those are and how those cost, what they would cost, and somewhat the complexity and lack of complexity. Anything, from the beginning, I'm just going to say with respect to your pay is complicated, the way we do your pay. And anything, that you could potentially make changes that would have a more positive impact or a negative impact, but we really would have to get down into the nitty gritty, and I would need one of my payroll experts to really talk to you about that.
Okay.
How, what would be more complex, but I think that's almost on once the bill gets further progresses on what types of things that you're actually are going to be, that you might pass to have those benefits.
Okay.
Before, can I just ask her a question about what you just said?
Yeah.
We're all paid the same thing, Beth. How can that be complicated? I mean, on the salary piece, when you say it's complicated, how is that complicated?
So when my director of payroll found out I was going to testify in this bill today, she rolled me like a really long thing about how we pay you differently than we pay other state employees. So, and it's just, you guys get paid, we get paid in arrears. So typically regular employees get paid. We don't get paid for the current week and the previous week. We get paid for the next two. We get paid for the past 2 weeks. So that's part of it. So that makes your payroll different than the rest. That's just a start. Then when expenses are,
But independent of expenses, but our compensation is so simple. I mean, everyone being paid exactly the same thing cannot be complicated.
But I think, Senator, that she just said that we're paid differently than all the other state
I get that, but
employees.
that's been for a long time. I mean, so that's, it's not new or anything. But the benefits or the other pieces are complicated maybe, but the compensation itself doesn't strike me as very complicated.
you wouldn't think so.
No, I would.
But I heard differently this morning.
Oh, interesting.
But I heard differently this morning. So I always know every year, like I get a report that says all the legislatures pay is ready, they're ready to get paid. And like, there's a big sigh of relief and I'm like, good job, but I don't ever know what's behind that. And I know I found a little bit more about what's behind that. So it is, yeah. So it's a little more complicated than because one is because you're different. Because you're different than how we pay the rest of state employees. And then also when you do expenses that are taxable, that is also a bit of a challenge because as Eric just said, you put the expenses into the vision system, then we take the taxes out of your next paycheck.
Right.
But if you worked the same time, but sometimes taking those taxes out of your paycheck is a challenge because you may be just putting in for expenses and you're not getting, your paychecks aren't that big. So that can be a challenge, also a challenge if those are not entered in a timely fashion.
That is a really good point to make. Two things that you just said. One, our paychecks are not that big. And two, that it's complicated because of the timing of the expenses and the pay. And I think this is something that Mike went over with us
Okay.
last week as
Yeah.
well. But I'm gonna ask that we hold questions so that the
Sure.
commissioner can get through her testimony and then we can have more questions. So
And
go
I
ahead.
did send over just a one pager for you that's in your notes that we just sent to Olivia, so you might not have it, but all it is it's the links to the two different types of benefits that we're talking about. So one is the flexible spending account, so there's a link to that on our website on how that works. And there's also a link to our healthcare plans and how those work. And there's also a pricing chart that showed you kind of the various options, what employees pay depending on if it's a single, two-person or family plan, and then what the state pays and the total cost. So I just thought that was important information for you to have it for your committee.
Yeah, great.
It's
Thank
just a
you.
one pager, right?
Yep, it's just a one pager.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, with some links if you want to do some more research. But for those of you who don't know, flexible spending accounts allow the employee to, through payroll deduction, deduct a certain amount each week, put it into an account, and then use that money in that account to get reimbursed for either childcare expenses or healthcare costs. We have a contractor, a vendor that administers that for us. It's our flexible spending account vendor. So all of the money goes in through payroll deduction. You do the claims, you provide your receipts, and that all goes through the vendor, and then they send you a reimbursement check. So it's pretty straightforward. The process is pretty straightforward. There are very strict IRS guidelines about both plans and how they work. So we would need to make sure that however we set it up, that that whatever program you set up is within those guidelines. And again, those are designed to do the same, kind of the same amount out of your pay every week, and you usually set that up for the whole year. You're different because you're more like a seasonal worker. You have bigger paychecks when you're in session, and then only when you meet. So it's only kind of a day at a time or whenever when you meet outside of session. So to have those expense or those deductions taken out every week or every pay period for a year, you wouldn't have you wouldn't have that paycheck deduction. That would also be the same thing for healthcare expenses. Now I know the bill says that the legislature would pay 100% of the cost, but I also had heard in testimony that that was an error, that you were expecting that the employer would pay 80% and the employees would pay 20%, which is how all the rest of the employees pay for their healthcare costs today. So if that worked and you were paying through it the whole rest of the year, the time of the year you're not in session, you would not likely be able to do that through payroll deduction because your pay would not be large enough. Because our plan is expensive.
80% of zero is still zero.
It's expensive, and it's that. So there are ways to do that through. So we have in the legislation other organizations that also purchase health insurance for us, like the Vermont State Employees Association. I believe they're on our plan. They send us a check. So the other ones, the organization does it through their payroll, and they send us a check for the costs. Of course, we do your payroll.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different, but but also if an employee goes on off payroll, they do send us checks. We do have ways to process those checks. It's manual. It's manual as well. So I think all those things would need to be considered on how this would work if that ends up being what legislation is passed. And so just in general, for the employee's perspective, the least expensive plan for an individual employee is about $9,000, almost $10,000 a year. And so that's the least expensive single employee with the least expensive plan. And then the state's payment of that, I believe, is 40,000. That's the most, for the most expensive part that the state would pay would be 40,000. So it is in that chart that, so yeah.
Oh, it's,
The
oh, it's
states-
here.
The state's share for a family plan, the total choice, which is a little more expensive than our point of service plan, is $32,008.681 a year. And on the least expensive plan, the employee share for an individual plan would be $9,946. And that is what I sent to you. So you have all of that information. So we did have several years back, legislators were able to purchase into the healthcare plan at 100% share, so they paid the whole thing. People at the end, nobody was doing that. And it is, I think more people find value in going to the exchange and buying a plan on the exchange, and that's available. So I think that's kind of why that phased out. It would be different if your employer is paying part of the share, part of that, but very few people would sign up for a family plan that cost $40,000 a year, or $40,851 a year.
Right. Wait, do you have more?
That's about it, really.
Okay, Senator Clarkson.
Yeah, I'm just not familiar with flexible spending plans.
Yep.
But what are they? And I assume they cover childcare. So they are flexible. What are they?
So there's two type of flexible spending care plans in this, in the legislation, and we offer to our employees. One is the dependent care. So you can put aside from your paycheck up to $5,000 a year, and that money can be used to kind of pay yourself back for what you paid for childcare or elder care.
Or medical expenses.
That's a different.
That's healthcare.
That's the dependent care. That's the dependent care plan. So there's two. So there are two different plans, different rules apply. So different limits, different limits on the amount of money that can be put in there. And actually, there's other differences as well.
So healthcare is higher, you could put more.
No, you can put more into the dependent care.
But you could only take 5,000 out. Right.
You can put $5,000 you can take $5,000 out of your check, put that into the dependent care spending account. And then when you pay for your daycare, you keep that receipt, you send it to the vendor, and the vendor reimburses you for the money you've saved. And the benefit of that is you can do that pre-tax.
Yes.
So it's kind of like giving yourself a raise. And that's why the IRS has very kind of strict guidelines around that and how that's administered. The healthcare.
Sorry, just before we do that, why is there a limit on it? Why is there a limit of $5,000?
You need to ask the IRS.
It's
federal law.
No, I'm just curious.
That's the law.
I see you, Senator Vihosky. Do you want to take a question, or you were going to explain the health care one?
And the healthcare one, the limit is $3,050 per year. It's a little different there in that as soon as you sign up, let's say I want to put $1,000 aside, that goes into your account immediately, and then you kind of pay that down throughout the year. So you would be eligible to be reimbursed for the full amount as soon as you sign up and the new plan year begins. But you would have to kind of pay that off throughout the year. Or you could wait and get all your, reimburse all your expenses kind of at the end. And that's the same thing. You have to upload your receipts, and the vendor verifies if that's okay. And then they put a check. They can direct deposit it. They can send you a fiscal check, however you choose.
And there are some of those plans that if you don't spend everything that you've put in the plan, you lose that money. And then there are some that you get reimbursed
So
or rolls over. Which one?
There's two different healthcare ones. There's a health savings account,
Mhm.
which is different, and we don't have that.
Okay.
Those usually kind of go along with high deductible healthcare plans.
Right.
The employer has that. We have the healthcare It's a healthcare spending account, which is different,
And so do you lose it if you put more than?
You do lose it, but you
Yeah.
have, there's a time frame. So you have till March
Right,
of the next year to get reimbursed for that.
okay,
So it doesn't, even though you could save the $3,050 for calendar year 23, you would have until the end of the first quarter of March 24 to get reimbursed.
got it, okay. Senator Bielanski.
And so I have a couple of questions. So there's no rollover in the flexible spending account, because I know sometimes there's like a little bit, like, I'm thinking of our account, I think we can roll over 500 each year.
I could check. I
Okay,
don't think so, but I would check on that, on the rollover there. I don't, there may be a small amount, but I would have to check on that.
okay, and it's strictly reimbursement. It doesn't come with like a point of sale ability to like go to my doctor's office and use my flex spending card to pay
You can
for.
do that.
Okay,
You can use your flex spending card, you get a credit card, and if they fill it up like a debit card,
Yeah.
you can use it that way.
okay. And then my other question was about sort of the pay complexity and if it would be less complex to set a yearly legislator salary that just got broken out into the 52 weeks.
Most likely,
It would be less complex to do that?
yes.
Because then we just blend into everybody
Well,
else.
that was sort of my thought as you were going back and forth, is everybody else is likely different than us because they're paid throughout the year, just a regular reoccurring salary.
Right, or just paid on, like, just paid on what they put on their timesheet. So you
Yeah.
folks don't do timesheets, right?
No,
We all do, everybody, we all do. We all do timesheets.
They don't.
that's another reason we're different, right?
Yeah.
So,
That's because we
so
don't work 40 hours a week.
just to
We work so
reiterate,
much
to make sure I understand, so what Senator Bielanski suggested, so even if we made the same small amount that we make right now, if we spread it out throughout the whole year, that would be easier on your end, the processing end, to
It
have
would
it.
be easier, certainly from, well, administratively, from the benefits perspective, for sure. I don't know what type of complexities that would add, but on my brief conversation this morning, it was suggested to me that it could potentially be easier.
Okay.
Right.
The downside, of course, is that for people who need the money during
Yeah,
that
we
5
don't
months that we earn it, it's hard to wait until December to
Right.
get the whole thing. So,
Right.
Yeah, yeah, Senator Watson.
When you say that it would be simpler, does that mean that it would, is there a benefit for you all in terms of making your lives easier to doing it that way? Or is it because this is the way it's always been, it's not gonna be any easier? Does that question make sense?
No, I think part of it is that there's times that you don't earn enough to cover your taxes,
Right.
especially for
that's the
town
challenge.
meeting week, so that's what kind of creates a challenge there. It may still create a problem with on the expense side as well, depending on how much you're getting reimbursed and if it's taxable, if it's not. So it is, yeah, it's certain, I mean, your pay is complicated. And if you wanted to hear more about that, I certainly could bring in a payroll expert to talk to you more about that. But I have to say, I'm more of a benefits expert than a payroll expert.
And the benefits are, I think, the major thing that people are really, I mean, they're missing better pay, there's no question, but they are, to have no benefits. And can you speak to us a little about the retirement benefit?
Wait, Senator
sorry,
Clark, I
sorry,
thought
I'm
Senator
sorry, I thought-
Watson was speaking, so we're
Oh,
gonna
sorry, I
wait.
thought,
Well, I think I've got my question answered. If it's not any simpler, that's helpful. I mean, I'm relating it to my other role as a teacher where we are, and it not totally the same, but we're also sort of seasonal in that we've got,
Yeah.
long break in the summer. And so we have a choice to say, do you want 50, do you want your paycheck split out across the whole year, or do you want to just get paid
Right.
in, while you're in session? And one So the reason I was asking that was because, you know, if it is legitimately easier, then like, could we offer people a choice? But it sounds like that would actually not be helpful.
Yeah, I don't know if offering the choice would be easier or not.
Okay.
It's not just taking
it one way
right.
Right,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's complexities to all of it, and I think first it's determining if legislators would be eligible for, you know, I think the healthcare reimbursement counts, the healthcare and the dependent care, even though they seem the same, they have different IRS rules. And then the regular healthcare, how that would work and how the people would pay their premiums once they're out, you know, once they're not getting enough of a paycheck to be able to use that as payroll
Right,
deductions.
because we would quickly, anybody who wanted to take advantage of all of these options would run out of money to do so unless we increase the pay. Significantly.
It's a nice idea.
So the bill both allows for legislators to take advantage of the flex spending, and it also creates a new benefit for childcare reimbursement. Did you notice that in the bill? It's not just the flex spending, it's childcare reimbursement, dependent care reimbursement.
So there's the IRS dependent care reimbursement program that we run through our vendor that you can do through payroll deduction.
No,
And then the other one is a additional benefit that would, I assume would be a taxable benefit that you would give to your employees that would not, we would be involved in that in the sense that we would need to take the taxes out.
Well, it would be
Or-
similar to the stipend for meals or the stipend for lodging. It would be a stipend for legislators who have dependent care.
But I
expenses.
expect it's probably a taxable stipend. So we would have to find a way to pay the taxes on that. And you would either come out of your paycheck,
Right.
like it does now when you have a taxable expense in the expense system.
Yeah.
The taxes, we still take the taxes from your paycheck. So I think we would have to do the same thing.
It would be more, it would be just another field in vision, basically. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't know how that, I don't know the whole process on how that works, but
Okay, all right. Senator Clarkson, do you have another question?
Yeah, my question was just on retirement pay, which, I mean, you know, for those of us who worked here for a length of time to have nothing to show for it in terms of adding to retirement or what is that? What would the option be for that?
the Department of Human Resources doesn't handle retirement paychecks, so that goes all through the retirement system. So once you're not an employee anymore, we don't pay you, we don't pay your pension, that all works for the treasurer's office. So you would talk to the retirement division about anything
So we
related
should
to
talk to the
retirement.
treasurer.
Okay.
Okay.
That's, I mean, there's nothing in the bill about that right now, but. we
No, I know,
certainly-
but
Yeah,
it's of interest to some of
yeah,
us.
yeah. Senator Watson?
I'm like,
So my understanding is that stipends are taxable, reimbursements are not. And just the way that it's phrased right now in the bill, the childcare, the dependent care is framed as a reimbursement. So just wondering,
I don't know.
okay, that's
I'm
right.
not an accountant.
Okay, yeah, no worries.
Yeah, we can get that
Yeah.
answer, but you're right, it is drafted as a reimbursement to avoid the tax problem.
Right, right.
But we would need to get clarity from somebody on that.
It's helpful.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jennifer Carvey, Legislative Council. I had talked about this with Abby Shepherd, our tax attorney. And it seems like dependent care or childcare expenses are treated differently under IRS rules than mileage and travel related expenses. So you may not have the same option without setting up a cafeteria plan or something like that to allow non-taxable treatment of that kind of benefit.
Sorry, can you, so.
it may not be like a
was-
meal.
I was following you all the way until the very end. So, unless you set up
There's I don't know much about cafeteria plans. I will say it's a different set part of federal tax law, but basically travel related, the mileage, the lodging, the meals are all eligible to be treated as an accountable plan under IRS rules, which means they can be non-taxable for income tax purposes. It's our understanding that dependent care assistance is treated differently, have the same eligibility for non-taxable treatment.
Thank you. That's all.
Yes.
So it would have to be taxed.
So it would either have to be taxed or there might be other ways if you talk to benefit specialists of setting something up, but I don't think anyone in this branch or maybe in this seat is prepared to speak to that.
Senator White, I see your hand up?
I was,
Okay.
because Mike.
Oh, Mike had his hand. I think there's- Go ahead.
Just to answer, Mike Front, Legislative Operations, just to answer Senator Clarkson's question about retirement.
Mhm.
So legislators are eligible to participate in the state's deferred compensation plan, which is through the retirement office. And I've assisted legislators in deferring their compensation to that retirement planning.
Wow, I never been aware of that.
It's in Mike's letter.
It is as part of the memo that I send out every year, but
It's not funny, I have just like
Also,
never focused on it.
if you'd like to, I can show you how. It's basically just taking some of your pay, if not all of your pay, and deferring it into a 401k, or it's one of
Yeah.
those, retirement
It's a
plans.
I mean, just even to have a little bit taken each week out and put into a 401k.
That is something that we could help you set up, and any legislator we could help set up.
That has been an option.
For a long time.
Since I've been here, yes.
Oh, that's great. I had no idea. That's pathetic.
I guess we don't advertise it well enough.
You should do an Instagram post about that.
There's
we
no
may
match.
not-
I'm sorry, there's no match, but you can also do that pre-tax.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you want to defer the tax till essentially, when you're retired and maybe not making as much money.
I think for us, sadly.
Maybe.
I know, I was like, do I take the $13,000 I make now and make it less than $13,000 so I can have a little more than 13,000?
Yeah.
Yes, there's social security.
Senator Vitowski.
I forgot my question.
I'm sorry. Okay, are there any other things to confuse the room right now? Mike, thank you for volunteering.
It's just something that I'm curious about, and Beth may have, Commissioner Stigi may have to bring this back to her payroll folks or folks that have been in her office for a while, but is there, I've always wondered why we pay legislators through the Department of Human Resources and the state as the HRIS system. It has seemed to me since I started working here 5 years ago that we have to fit legislative schedules. We've really manipulated your system to meet the needs of the body here. And I've always wondered, why are we using BTHR as our payroll system? Is there a statutory reason for it, or is it because that's just how it's always been, so that's how it always will be? Because I don't know if you have to or not. And I don't know if that's something to consider with the study committee.
Yeah, I don't believe that there's any statutory requirement. If you wanted to hire a payroll company to do your payroll, to do legislators' payroll, it would make sense to
Do
do.
we pay you something?
You do.
Yeah,
Okay,
we do.
okay.
You do, there is, so the Vision Fund,
Uh-huh.
which is an internal service fund,
Uh-huh.
pays for the VTHR system and the Vision system. So
Okay.
that would pays, and it does,
There's like a
there's a
small amount that
surcharge
comes from-
per
yeah.
employee that goes
Okay.
into that fund.
Well, we could add that to the language of the off-session study committee to look at. Okay, are there any other questions for the commissioner? Did you remember?
I remembered
Yeah,
my
go ahead.
question, and it may be for the commissioner, it may be for Jen, I don't know, but in the conversation around childcare stipends, would that change if someone was instead submitting for childcare reimbursement?
No, that's actually what it says in the bill is reimbursement, but it does not, as I understand it, it's just the type of expense is different, and so it's subject to different federal tax treatment, regardless of whether it's an allowance or reimbursement.
Do you think we should have Abby come in to talk about that, or I mean, does she maybe she doesn't have any more to say about it than what you just said, so.
She may be able to, she certainly has a broader understanding of the issues with the, tax credits
Yeah,
and such. So if there's interest in understanding how all those work together.
okay. And do you think it would be helpful for us to maybe, as we move along with the bill, to have one of your payroll people come in? Or another staffer?
It might,
Okay. Well,
if you want, if you definitely want to
into the.
into
nuts and bolts
into nuts,
of it all.
nuts and
Okay.
bolts. I don't know if Mike thinks that would be helpful or not. He has a lot of he understands a lot of those things because he works pretty closely with those
Okay.
folks.
Yeah,
Okay.
and your staff has been fantastic to work with too, by the way. I do want to say that they've been very respectful, very professional.
That's great. I would expect nothing less, but
Yeah.
that's great. Senator Clarkson, just one.
Yeah, no, it's just interesting. The whole, where I thought you were going with our legislative pay is different than where you ended up. But because we're a separate branch of government, that's where I thought you were going, is the legislature, both Leg Council, JFO, the whole legislative branch should maybe have its own payroll. But judiciary doesn't use its own payroll, does it? It uses.
No, all branches of
So
government.
all
use it.
branches use yours. That's what I just wanted to establish, is quite honestly, all branches of government use Fess firm.
Yes,
Do you have the same complications with part-time or seasonal staff?
seasonal staff typically doesn't get benefits and they still are paid on a timesheet and on the same schedule. So they're still paid, they submit their time, like regular employees submit their time and then they get paid for, I work this Friday, that paycheck comes not the next Thursday, the following Thursday.
Do they have the same complications with, if they have expenses like mileage or something like that?
No, they go through the vision system and it's, I don't, and it's whether the expenses, I think most of the expenses through there, if you're reimbursing through receipts, which is what we do, it's just the same as regular employees. So there's not I don't know that there's a per diem option. There may be something for some seasonal park staff. I don't know for sure. I would have to talk to the parks commissioner.
So maybe this is, I'm not sure if this is a question for you or for Mike, but why is it that ours is in real time instead of delayed time, for lack of a better, is there a history to that?
I don't know.
I've been asking that question and trying to change that since I started here. Because I see the stress that it puts on the system and in between the HR staff and myself. The reasoning I've heard again and again is the timing of the session, because you come in early January right after the holidays, and if you were on the state of Vermont employee regular schedule, you wouldn't have your first paycheck until probably the last week of January.
I see. So it's just that delay. Okay. Well, we might want to think about that a little bit more. If it's causing so much stress for all of you, it's like a matter of whose stress you cause.
Well, it causes legislative stress to not get paid. So I've always understood that the reason we do it is that people already are not being paid for their first week. So there's already a lag and we catch up and, so there's only 1 week that's in real time. And then basically the rest of it is, because the first week we're not paid. Second week we get paid.
So you're always paid in 2-week increments.
Right.
And it's just, you're paid current. It doesn't mean that it's always going to happen the second week, but it probably will happen on the second week.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I guess I'd just like to, as we think about all these things, if we had to account for our time and do a time sheet, our time is so much beyond, during when we're in session, so much beyond 40 hours a week. I mean, we'd be, so which leads me to the question and a bill I put in the House years ago and have been ridiculed for ever since, which is being paid out of session. And how would we, and how we bill for that? Because lawyers bill on an hourly basis. Lots of people bill on an hourly basis and they break it down and charge for what that appropriate constituent time took. So if it was a 15-minute meeting, you would do, it's in 15-minute increments. Is, because I think one of the things we really do have to address, in addition to everything else we've talked about, is our compensation for when we're out of session. And which is a huge piece of our time. I mean,
Well, this bill does address some of that.
it does,
Yeah.
but that piece, what would that add for complication to the system?
I'll defer that.
I mean, we would just put it in, I assume, and we'd figure out a way to put it into Vision and account for your time.
It would be through VTHR, and you basically just have to do your timesheets and account for it through
We'd
that
have to learn how to
system.
do that, yeah. He said that's a
Senator
nightmare.
Clarkson, we talked about this last time, that because there are two provisions in the bill for off-session compensation.
I think I
One-
must have missed that part of our discussion.
Yeah, and Mike went through the details of that.
I did miss it because I had another,
Oh, okay.
I was in the speaker's office. I wasn't there for this.
Yeah, so there
that's- I
are two
apologize.
provisions in the, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But we've taken enough of your time, so thank you very much,
Thank you.
Commissioner, and we'll let you know where we end up with this one, and maybe we'll see you next week.
Perhaps, we'll see.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And Jen or Mike or Becca, space, or if you see it.
But Howard is in the hall. I
Well,
can hear him.
Steve should be out there.
He is.
We can hear him.
You are.
He was.
I wonder if the off-session provisions would actually help with some of the like tax reimbursement
Yeah, I
stuff, because actually we would not be getting this.
I think
Yeah.
that, thanks, Bev.
Sure, how are you?
See you guys. Okay, thank you. Have a seat.
Thank you.
Well, you know all of us, so we're gonna forego the introductions, but we just wanted to have you in to tell us your thoughts on S39, which is about legislator compensation. And I do want to point out, in case you didn't hear from last week when we took up this bill, that the healthcare split was supposed to be the same 80-20 that, so,
Okay.
yeah. So if
Great.
that was what you were gonna lead off on, I'm just gonna save you time and say, you don't need to give us a hard time about that, because it was unintentional and my error. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you think.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Steve Howard, Executive Director of the Vermont State Employees Association. And once again, it's always great to be back in my favorite committee. I'm here to testify on S39. So first of all, the healthcare, I would just want to start by saying that for a number of years now, the VSEA members, almost 200 members who set our legislative priorities, have prioritized increased compensation and improved benefits for legislators. And that really is out of our concern that the legislature is unattainable for regular working folks, for our retirees, for our active employees, who we think have a great deal to contribute to the discussion here in the building. And just speaking personally, I served when I was a young 20-year-old whippersnapper. And I'm still paying the price for having served in the legislature for 12 years. I lost a tremendous amount of economic power that I could have now. And I didn't have a family or anything to support, but I found it difficult as a single person to do that. So our members are 100% behind the effort to look at the compensation for legislators and to try to improve it and increase it in the interest of true representation and participation. The healthcare issue was something I was going to flag for you. I would just mention a couple of things. I did see the language on page 3 and 4. I think it's just relocating language that gives VSEA employees of the VSEA, of the union itself, access to the state employees healthcare. And I would say that one of our legislative priorities this year, and something we began to talk with Treasurer Pierce about, is also giving VSEA employees access to the defined benefit retirement plan. We'd ask the committee to consider that. 21 employees, they're all fairly young. They are in great shape, and they will make a positive contribution to the defined benefit plan. So I just want to make a pitch while I have a moment to do that. I also just wanted to talk a little bit about the child and elder care construct that's in the bill. So currently, for 10,000 state employees, there is a total of $140,000 available for child care and elder care. And that was an increase that was hard fought over a couple of bargaining sessions to get the administration to agree to that. $150,000, and the cap is $250, which is like nothing.
Per
Yeah.
person?
Yeah,
Total,
total. And
not
that's
per week or total?
total. That's what we do for childcare and elder care.
Sorry, $250?
A year.
A year. If you apply for it, you have to apply for it. And if you're approved, you can get up to $250 a year until $140,000 is gone. That's for 10,000.
You mean for everybody, if everybody took it?
No, you have $140,000 total for the entire 10,000 person state workforce in the bargain.
Right, that's what I mean. You have $140,000 for all those workers.
Right.
If they use $250 a piece.
Right,
That doesn't even pay for 1 week of childcare.
nothing. It's really crazy. So what our members think is,
Bargaining that one very hard.
well, then we have bargained with administration, this administration and previous administrations that just have not, that has not been something that they valued and thought was important. And so we never were able to get that. We've been pushing for increases for a number of sessions, bargaining rounds, and we just finally succeeded this year. This time we went from 110,000 to 140,000.
Wait, we're gonna have, why don't you finish your
Right.
testimony, then we'll take more questions.
So
Can I
what,
Okay, let's clarify.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so wait, I am confused because my understanding of what we just heard was there is an FSA. So you can put more than, you can put up to $5,000 currently as a state employee, but this is money that the state is allocating, not coming out of people's paycheck.
right, exactly.
Okay, so what we were talking about is slightly different, just so I understand, because we are not asking for in this bill that you get money to pay for your dependent benefit, but instead you are allowed to take out of your pay to put towards it, which are two different things.
No, actually, in the bill is both.
Oh, it is in both. It is
Yes,
both.
it is
Oh, okay.
both, Yeah.
There we go. Thank you.
So I had,
We need to walk through the bill again, Jen.
Because I thought dependent care was only, okay,
Yeah, it's both.
okay.
so I had another one of my brilliant ideas, which of course comes from my very talented staff that we have at ESEA. And I would ask the committee to think about, certainly we support, we would want, we want consistent benefits for legislators with the state employees throughout the state, so that we don't have, dietary aides at the vet's home with an inferior benefit to state legislators. So we'd like to think about that, but one thought.
How about vice versa?
That what? So one thought we do have is, and I don't know if this would be a study that you might consider for your bill, but we have volumes of empty office space.
Yeah.
Volumes of
Of what?
empty office space.
Oh, empty.
And we have many more state employees who are working in offices who are coming to the office and they don't know why. They could do the job at home, they haven't done the job at home, and it's more just an interest in surveillance culture than in really what the state needs. So we would ask you to consider on-site childcare, studying the impacts of on-site childcare available to all state employees, including state legislators, and as something that would be beneficial to the state workforce, attracting and keeping state workers, but also opening up the possibility to a whole range of potential legislators who might want to seek this office. Certainly, so that's something we would ask you to consider. And then in just the study section of the bill, the question about whether you need more staff, clearly you do need more staff. We'd ask you to take a look at what's happening in Massachusetts right now and the concept of legislative staff being able to unionize and to be able to be part of the VSEA. That would be, that's something that is happening actively in the Massachusetts legislature. We think that should be part of the study as well. What would be how would that work? How could that happen? So that we could collectively bargain on behalf of the legislative staff, which we think would increase the pay and benefits and provide some protections of basic fairness to them that would enhance their experience as legislative employees. So those are my observations. But in general, I would say the members of the VSEA are supportive of the spirit of the bill.
Well, thank you. One just comment I would have about the on-site childcare. So first, the reimbursement benefit that is in the bill, and also I think the flex spending for it is broader than childcare. It's dependent care, so it would include. Thank you, Senator. It would also include elder care, or if you have a spousal care, vulnerable adult care, or whatever. So it'd be beyond childcare, I think, as you know, there are
I
legislators.
misspoke. I meant to include that as well.
Yeah, as you know, there are legislators who are struggling with that very issue in our body. And also, I think that one thing with on-site childcare that's a little unique for legislators is most of us live far away. So not everybody wants or needs childcare here in Montpelier. They might need it in Middlebury or Hartford or Essex or whatever. So that's a complication, whereas, the bulk of the state employees are in Waterbury or here, I think, or Burlington maybe.
Chittenden County and Washington County are about equal.
So it's a little spread out, but I hear you about the potential for shared childcare options as a possibility. So
I think it would be an interesting thing to look at while we have this issue on the table. And I have in the past, we have some chronic 24/7 facilities in particular, but throughout state government, in the 24/7 facilities, chronic vacancies that we are spending millions of dollars on. And it's creating instability in those systems. And I've said to commissioners in the past, if you offer childcare, people will quit their jobs in the private sector and they will come work for corrections. And they will do that for the benefits.
There's another bill that was just introduced today that's about childcare.
Yeah.
That's another one you might want to watch.
Yeah, we are. I should also mention that we are big supporters of Let's Grow Kids, and we are supporting their initiative as well.
Senator Biehoski.
I sort of agree in sort of looking into the option of on-site childcare. And the reason I say that is for the positions that Steve mentioned, as well as our position, it doesn't always line up really neatly with the hours of childcare. I mean, I certainly can't count on one hand the number of times I've been out of this building in time that I could pick up a child at 3:30 or 4 in the afternoon. So in that sense, that might be really helpful for some folks to have on site that was a little more conducive to the variable nature of the hours of this work.
The flexible nature.
I'm
Sure, what a nice way to put it.
I know that Jen's staff is dealing with this constantly, for example. Senator Watson, did you have a question? Or
I did not.
sorry.
I'm chewing on all of this because it's obviously very relevant to me, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking about because I'm also very interested in the on-site childcare, even just for the sake of not even necessarily the legislators, but the state workers. But I know that is there's a lot of overlap there with the bill that was just introduced today. So anyway, I'm willing to hold back on that thought to see what happens with the childcare bill.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of vehicles to talk about childcare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe it's worth something that we can address.
Sounds good.
I just think there's an opportunity as well, because actually one of the silver linings of COVID is management has had to embrace home offices, which they were very hesitant to do before COVID, and it worked very successfully. And so we have all of this space now that we're leasing, and we own throughout the state that could be better utilized as an adult day or as a childcare facility. And it would, I think, enhance the number of people interested in working for the state, people staying, working, people who want to continue to work for the state. And, I would just say also that it should, even if legislators are here in Montpelier, so often one of the challenges you hear is that the spouse who is at home, or the other parent who is at home in their hometown, is now a single parent, and they may welcome the access to childcare.
That's a great, maybe we should get partners to come testify.
Oh my God.
There's a great idea.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Only just
Stressor.
hear what my husband would say. I hadn't even thought about that. Well, thank you, Steve, for
You're
your
welcome.
time today. And I think that's all we have for today. Olivia, you can take